Hello and welcome to my Learn With Me Minifreak series. This is episode 7, Oscillators 2.1. So first, what is a Learn With Me series? Learn With Me is a series where you follow my end-to-end process, learning to get the best out of a synthesizer. In this case, it is the Arturia Minifreak. Last episode, we started diving into the oscillator algorithms. We got through about half of them. In this episode, we're going to look through the remainder. First, init patch. Let's jump straight to the first algorithm, which is speech. As you can hear, it speaks. So the first parameter, the wave parameter, is called type, which selects from a selection of types of word or vocal sound. In the bottom end of the range, we get more formant-y vowel sounds. In the upper end, there are words. The timbre parameter seems to adjust the fundamental pitch and the formant of the sound. And the word parameter selects which of the words, or presumably sounds, so we animate through the vowel sounds there. Quite specific. I'm sure you couldn't really use it solo without a significant amount of effects, but I think it's a fun thing to have available. Next. So that's a release. So this is a modal resonator. In a sense, Car plus Strong is also a modal resonator, but it's designed to simulate a plucked string. This, to me, sounds like it's emulating a struck tube. It sounds like the timbre controls the material, effectively, the tube is made of, from something more wooden to something increasingly bright and metallic. The decay, just like on Car plus Strong, controls how much feedback is happening in the resonator, so you get a longer tone when the decay is higher. And inharmonic controls the amount of inharmonic content. The thing that I've noticed with it is that as the inharmonic content goes up, once it gets above about 40, you're not really playing in concert pitch anymore, so you can't really play it melodically. Let's try it lower down. So in the bass, especially with a lot of inharmonics, you get almost like a church bell type of tone out of it. It seems like if you control that timbre carefully, you can get some acoustic bass sounds out of it in the right register. But the inharmonic, you have to, I think, worry about how to tune that to give you the right pitch, but also the right timbre. Moving on. Noise. Very long release. So you can note there is a pitched element as well as a noise element. In this case, the shape parameter brings in more and more of that pitched element. On the Minifreak, you only have one oscillator, so if you want noise and pitch, that single algorithm has to have both, so I presume that's why it's done this way. First parameter, wave, is the type of noise. A sort of crackle through to a white noise, through to something metallic sounding. So the rate seems to be the rate at which this noise is generated, which can be thought of as a pitch here. Let's try the interesting, because the noise is more in the upper register for this crackly noise, you can dial it back a lot with the filter and you get an interesting tone. The bandpass, also interesting. Let's move on. Bass. So a saturation parameter. Taking us from something reminiscent of a filtered saw, getting gradually brighter, getting gradually louder and more distorted. So that's an actual wave fault, the timbre parameter. Okay. And the final parameter brings in some noise. Let's try and filter this down. Interesting. When it's played in this register, it reminds me a little bit of a bassoon, which is quite unexpected, but a nice tone, and I'm sure we can design some interesting bass sounds out of that. Next is Saw X. So it sounds like a saw. As we increase the wave parameter, the saw mod, we get a synth type of sound going on. The shape timbre parameter, as you move it up and down, in the middle you have a point where it feels like it's not really doing much, or that's the minimal effect. And there are two sound variations. One very high, a very high frequency, low in the mids and the bass. And at the bottom you get something which is more present in the mids. Again, noise. Let's try and do something a bit like a pad for this. So The tone in that case was reminding me a bit of a string sound. There's a pretty broad scope to what's available with that sound, and I think it would benefit a lot from modulating some of these parameters. Moving on. So we can hear that there are sine waves and something is happening with respect to the harmonics. When you get to the top of that wave parameter, it actually sounds an octave above. So you're adjusting where the harmonics are, but also the ratio of volumes. A rectify, I presume, is like using a bridge rectifier, so the negative part of the wave becomes positive. It's a strong form of distortion in this case, but very deterministic distortion. Quite a nice tone there. I'm interested in doing some animation, probably of the cutoff and maybe of this rectify parameter. I think there's some interesting tones to be found, including the adjusting the harmonics. Let's keep moving. Audio in. I don't have an audio source connected, so I'm going to skip that one. Finally, wavetable. One of the things I remember about wavetable is, well, first, like any wavetable, you can scan the wavetable with the position parameter. The shape parameter is a filter. Below the midpoint, you're getting a low pass filter. Above the midpoint, you're getting a high pass filter. So the pulse width, I'm assuming, if this is your wave, it's compressing the wave and leaving 0 remaining. So when you take it to its extreme, it sounds like a very narrow pulse wave. So in this case, I'd say probably the wave and timbre parameters would be quite nice to animate. Another thing to note though is if you go in Sound Edit Oscillators, Wavetable Select. So there are a number of wavetables here. So let's pick one. What sounds interesting? Human being. Okay. Make this into a sort of keys type sound. Yes, we wouldn't normally do that. So I think that would benefit significantly for some effect, as would all of these. but hopefully I've demonstrated the breadth of timbre that a single oscillator can achieve. In the next episode, I'm going to come back and I'm going to experiment using oscillator 2, which can be a second sound source, but instead I'm going to use it to process the audio coming out of oscillator 1, which I think will give us some interesting possibilities. In any case, thank you very much for joining me today, and goodbye.